For me, one of the most significant interactions with our Srila Gurudeva, not typical, but anyway, it was 2003 probably, and it was right at the end of Kartik. So that year he'd had some kind of, during Kartik, he'd had some kind of examination of the heart about 2 weeks before. So he was a little, not very strong. And right at the end, day after Kartik, someone said something to me, and it kind of, I started thinking about my relationship with Gurudev, and somehow or other, I got into a big conflict. Like, on the one hand, Srila Gurudev wants me to surrender completely and be under his control or under his direction. And on the other hand, he wants me to take responsibility for my life. He never told me where to go and preach, practically. I mean, I decided to go to Russia. He never kind of told me where to go or what to do. So the two opposite poles. So what did he want? I wanted to get my relationship with him clear. And it was, I mean, it was like a big pendulum going in my brain. So I went off by myself on the bank of Yamuna. This was by Gopinath Bhavan. Bank of Yamuna, that time, it was a very broad beach there. And I went right out until I found a place there was nobody at all there, and I just sat down and I was chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, and responsibility, surrender, responsibility, surrender. And in the end, it was just too much. And in my heart, I just said, Srila Gurudeva, I just can't sort this out at all. I just accept you as you are. And I was just chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, feeling his presence and like just being like that. So sitting chanting, like really focused inside with Gurudev, and then I felt somebody walking around me. I thought, oh my God, stupid Hindus, what are they doing? And then walked around a second time. So I opened my eyes, and it's Madhav Maharaj and Gokul. So I said, what are you doing here? And Madhav Maharaj said, oh, Gurudev sent us. I said, Gurudev? So he pointed, and Gurudev was about 50 yards away. And Gurudev... and then he turned around and started walking away. So I offered obeisances in the sand, and this is like very, very early morning. And we kind of ran to catch up with Gurudev. And then Madhav Maharaj, told Gurudev what had happened. And Gurudev said, yes, very good process. So we walked like that. Then one of the ISKCON devotees, Bhakti Bringa Govinda Maharaj, he met Gurudev, he saw him, came up and offered obeisances and hugged him, and he said, oh Gurudev, please give me your mercy. And Gurudev said, I have become big zero. And then he walked on, and then he and Madhav Maharaj went to his room. And Gokul stayed outside. And he said, I'll tell you what happened. So he said, he was with Madhav Maharaj and Gurudev in the room. And Gurudev said, today I'll show you a devotee in Samadhi. We'll walk by the Yamuna. So they started walking, and Madhav Maharaj was really in anxiety about Gurudev. And he said, after a bit, he said, Gurudev, it's time to turn back. No, we'll go a little further. And this happened 2 or 3 times. And Gurudev said, no, we'll go a little further. And then in the end, they saw me sitting, in the distance. And he said, go and do parikrama. So I looked, from Gopinath Bhavan, the place that I'd been was invisible. From where, from Gopinath Bhavan, it was, and also I wasn't there that long. So it's not like I was sitting there for, a couple of hours in Samadhi and Gurudev picked up, and, I wasn't there for more than probably about 10 or 15 minutes. So it's very, very, very mystical. But actually, if we call to Gurudev, he comes. That we should understand. If we call to Gurudev, he comes. One time we were in Red Square in Moscow, and Gurudev was kind of, I don't know, it seems like where Astasaki is, I suppose. And I said, oh, Gurudev, and he was right there by my side. It's really important to understand that. Gurudev's really with us, and especially when we call. Like in Bhakti Rasayan, he says that Guru is more affectionate than millions of mothers. And what mother will not respond, will not come if their child is calling out?
I always think that I met Gurudev, or I not met him, but I came to Gurudev back in 1977 because I was living at New Govardhan at that time, which was the pioneering farming community of Murwillumbah, Australia. We were a small crew of Prabhupada's disciples pioneering on the land there, and all of a sudden, of course we didn't know about Prabhupada's sickness leela. I think I've come to understand in later decades that people, many other devotees around the world, people in India, devotees in India were aware of Prabhupada's condition, but we down in Australia were not aware, and we thought that Prabhupada was just going to go on and on and on. So the news of his passing came as a real shock. It was a real shock. Everybody was just dumbfounded. But over those next few days after the news of Prabhupada's going into Samadhi came, in those days, of course, there was no email and no Skype, no internet, so it was just all international communication was done by telephone. And the temple president was in touch with devotees in Vrindavan, and he was receiving news every half day or every few hours about what was going on in Vrindavan with Srila Prabhupada's transcendental Vigraha, and all the arrangements that were being made to put him into Samadhi and everything. And we heard this news about this wonderful Vaishnav who was there helping the devotees who were in so much shock and had absolutely nil experience. They didn't know the culture, they didn't know what to do to put their guru into Samadhi. And here was this wonderful Vaishnav who just took over and guided everybody so lovingly. And because the temple president would receive these messages and then he would relay them to us, the assembled devotees. And I remember hearing the sweetness of this message about this Vaishnav who had been so caring to Prabhupada's disciples in their time of dismay and distress. And that feeling of love, that potency of love, was so strong that it came through those telephone lines and entered my heart. Because I remember thinking, well, Prabhupada's gone from our vision, but at least there's somebody else that we can have faith in and we can turn to if there's need. I had that feeling at that very time. It was Narayan Maharaj. We knew him as Narayan Maharaj in those days. And so anyway, the decades went by, and I didn't think about Narayan Maharaj really anymore after that sort of the initial shock of Prabhupada's departure kind of went drifted back into history sort of thing. And I had some children and got into family life and making money and everything like that. And it wasn't until the mid-90s that I heard his name again, Narayan Maharaj. But this time it was it had infamous connotations around it. And but I had already had some very bad experiences with the GBC. So, I understood that the GBC was propagating this notion that Narayan Maharaj was all sorts of things. I don't even want to remember them, but he was not to be associated with. And I remember thinking, I don't accept that for one moment. If the GBC are saying that Narayan Maharaj is not to be associated with, I believe the opposite is true. And I aspired to hear from him. And at the time I was going through a time when, it had been 20 years since Prabhupada left by this time, and it was tough, going on, chanting, and I'd already stopped doing my Gayatris. I never stopped chanting my 16 rounds, but I didn't have any taste in chanting. I was only doing it because I'd promised to Prabhupada that I would chant 16 rounds a day. And But my mind was starting to wander off and sort of be interested in other things other than bhakti. And I knew that I lacked inspiration, but I just didn't know where to turn. And of course the idea of Shiksha Guru, we had heard of the idea of Shiksha Guru, but it wasn't really alive. It didn't really have much meaning to me, and where was a Shiksha Guru that you could trust anyway? But so I had Narayan Maharaj on my mind, and I was thinking, I really aspire to meet Narayan Maharaj, because I think that I had this feeling in my heart, because I remembered the inspiration that I'd gotten just from hearing of his words and his loving help at Prabhupada's Samadhi. And so I had this prayer, I'd like to meet Narayan Maharaj. And during those times, during those sort of hard times when spiritual life became sort of on a plateau, I wasn't feeling any nourishment anymore as I'd felt in the earlier years with Prabhupada. And I used to pray, Prabhupada, please come back, please come back. Somehow or other, just please come back and give me some direction again, some inspiration. And I knew, I had this idea also that, yeah, I must hear from Narayan Maharaj. And I remember getting a book of his. Somebody gave me a book called The True Conception of Guru Tattva. And I read that book from cover to cover, because I heard that so many devotees were turning to Narayan Maharaj. It was kind of considered to be a bad thing, but I was thinking, Narayan Maharaj must be very attractive. And it made my desire to hear from him, meet him and hear from him intensify. But somehow I didn't have the sincerity to actually get myself to where he was. So he came to New Zealand, and he came to New Zealand in 2001 the first time, and I missed him that time. I didn't even know he was in the country until the day after he left. And I remember hearing about it. One devotee who had been with him in New Zealand visited me and told me Narayan Maharaj was just here. He just left yesterday. And I said, what? Narayan Maharaj came to New Zealand and I didn't see him. How did that happen? And so the devotee said, don't worry, he'll be back in a year. So I waited another whole year. Life went on, you know. Gurudeva came back again in early 2002, and that's when I went to see him. And I spent 3 days with him, listening to his Harikatha. And at the end of those 3 days, my heart was just stolen. It wasn't as though I chose, yes, I'm going to become a follower of Narayan Maharaj. I didn't think that. I just thought that I would go and hear from him and appreciate his Harikatha, or appreciate his instructions, and he might bring me closer to Prabhupada. That's all I had been thinking. But it was like I became his over a period of 3 days. So it was almost instantaneous. It wasn't like instantaneous, but it was over 3 days, three periods of being with him, morning and evening, for 3 days. And when he was leaving, I remember realizing, hey, I'm a Narayan Maharaj follower, you know.
Very thankful that I've been given the opportunity to say a few words about Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Maharaj. First time I heard about him was, when I saw him also was in the early 80s. He used to actually come to Vrindavan, and that was after Prabhupada's, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada's disappearance. So he used to come to Vrindavan and give lecture in the Krishna Balaram Mandir, usually on Balaram Purnima and on Srila Prabhupada's disappearance day also. But when I the first time I was there from 1980 till 83 in Sri Vrindavan Dham, but then I went to Switzerland and then I went to New York. And actually when I was in New York, it was 1984 till 87, so first time I came to know about Gurudev Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Maharaj by hearing some tapes of some beautiful kirtans from Keshavji Gaudiya Math. And so Srila Bhaktivedanta Maharaj, so he was chanting in that cassette of bhajans and kirtans, and that immediately attracted me. There were other Vaishnavas also, his godbrother Sheshashai Brahmachari and others, but he was also, so he was one of the main singers. And we see, how we say sometimes that love by first sight. So, but with Vitmasla it was love by first hearing him chanting. And of course, it's also kind of seeing is by hearing. When I heard him singing, then immediately I felt, oh, there's so wonderful singing. And must be such a great personality. Immediately I was attracted and I felt some connection and some love there. And I wanted to immediately know about that personality who was singing there. And I asked the devotee who was having this cassette, Gurudev singing, and then he told me it is His Holiness Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Maharaj from the Gaudiya Math, Keshavji Gaudiya Math. And then I said, oh, okay, that is the place where Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada took sannyas. And then I made copy also. There were 2 tapes actually, and I had them for many, many years till the tape just was not working anymore. But then later on I found also on the internet the same tapes are there, the early ones. It was so attractive, and I really I was deeply touched, and I felt I want to meet that personality.